flags go up and diplomatic barriers come down. This summer, the Cuban embassy in Washington reopened after half a century. And soon after in Havana, the U.S. embassy reopened, creating for many a new sense of kinship between the two countries. Now, a News Channel 8 special, Cuba, A New Perspective.
Hola, bienvenidos. Hello and welcome. I'm Gene Ramirez. Ybor City is the historic center of Cuban culture in Tampa, but Tampa's Cuban community has spread throughout the Bay Area. It's constantly evolving, just like Cuba's history. I recently traveled to Cuba amidst historic changes in U.S.-Cuba relations. It was my first time ever.
The only thing that is going through my head right now is that this is probably what my mom saw the last time that she saw Cuba.
An emotional and educational journey as I connect with my Cuban roots, more than 5 decades since my family left the island. In this half hour, we'll show you a new perspective on Cuba from my journeys throughout the island nation. Beyond what most tourists see in Old Havana, though that is where we begin with a look at Cuba's colorful characters. Robert tells tourists no money, no problem picture, though many do leave him and his dogs a small tip. He's especially happy when he meets Americans. So far, so good, he says about the recent policy changes. He was happy to greet the anti-embargo Tampa delegation. He's one of many colorful Cuban characters. Politics aside, they fill the streets with music and dance. Afro-Cuban clairvoyants share the streets with food vendors and children. Cars, bikes, and everything in between in the sometimes chaotic streets of Havana that are increasingly seeing American foot traffic regardless of legal limitations.
United States, good people. Yeah. Give me 5.
Well, their attitude is positive, but the Cuban people do face many struggles. It's apparent to anybody who wanders off the beaten path. A group from the Tampa Chamber of Commerce that traveled to Cuba definitely took notice. This is your first time in Cuba. What's been your first impression?
I'm a little saddened by the deterioration of the buildings and just the sheer, what seems like to me, poverty.
These buildings need a tremendous amount of infrastructure, structural work, architectural work. A lot of them just need some very basic cleaning. I'm sure they all need plumbing. I mean, we walked through the streets of Havana yesterday and we saw all the streets torn up because now they're starting to replace all the water pipes and total infrastructure redevelopment here.
And how do you position yourself to do that when you have competition from all over the world, not just the U.S.?
Well, I think the best way to position, and yes, our company could play a part in it, but I think the best way to position it is to support the local architectural community here.
Next, the Tampa connection to Cuba's first Catholic church in decades. We take you to Sandino Pinar del Rio. Then, a new concept in communist Cuba, self-employment, and how Cuba's black market economy brings us face to face with the police. And later, I visit the home my mother left more than 50 years ago. A surprise meeting follows. Have you visited Cuba recently? Add WFLA Gene on Facebook and Twitter and share your stories with me. Welcome back to Cuba, A New Perspective. It will be costly to restore the once great buildings of Havana. In fact, that's one of the biggest concerns of the family that runs the Casa Particular, or bed and breakfast, that I stayed at. The stately 1925 mansion was once owned by Dolores Alonso. The widow of a doctor, we're told, helped fight yellow fever. Her son inherited the home and many other family properties 1 year before the revolution. He was allowed to continue living in the ornate mansion, but the ownership of all his properties was transferred to the government. With no family of his own, he married his maid so she could live in the house after his death. That's exactly what happened.
And then eventually she passed it on to Sylvia's family.
With ownership right changes, she was able to leave it to her dear friend Sylvia and her children, who now run it as a bed and breakfast. Sylvia would like to sell the house one day. Her son, meanwhile, wants to keep it as a private residence, but he can't afford to do that without renting out the rooms. The average income for Cuban workers is about $20 US per month. Tampa's history with Cuba dates back to the late 1800s and a thriving cigar industry. Today, the cigar tradition is alive and well in Ybor City as ties grow stronger. At Mother's Day Mass Sunday, these Cuban Catholics celebrated Our Lady of Charity, an image of the Virgin Mary, patroness of Cuba. They gathered in the back porch of a modest home turned parish center where kids go to Sunday school and matriarchs pray the rosary, but not for long. Father Cirilo Castro shows us a plot of land in the geographic center of Sandino, a rural town with Soviet-era apartments where many get around in horse-drawn carriages. It's where they'll make history thanks to Tampa Catholics.
It's the first church in Cuba in 57 years.
Father Ramon Hernandez of Tampa's St. Lawrence Church says parishioners raised $70,000 for the project starting back in 2010. Father Castro explains it's been delayed in part because of a lengthy construction permit process in Cuba and other church priorities. They've been waiting since the start of the revolution more than 5 decades ago, and nearly 20 years since a visit by Pope John Paul II paved a way for Catholics in a once atheist country.
After 20 years, 2 years is nothing.
2 whole years, that's how much longer these Cuban Catholics will have to wait to have their church, with construction starting this summer. In that same town of Sandino and other parts of Cuba, we met a new breed of Cuban entrepreneurs. An ironic concept in a communist country where the state owns most businesses. Up next, we explore how some Cubans and at least one American citizen are banking on new self-employment opportunities. Still, most Cubans work for state-run businesses, getting by on as little as $20 US a month. Their need forcing a black market that has Cuban police on alert. Our face-to-face encounter with a Cuban cop coming up. But first, another Tampa Cuban connection. Busch Gardens President Jim Dean recently traveled to Cuba. Here's what he had to say when we caught up with him at Havana's Marina Hemingway.
Well, I understand there's 12 million people in Cuba, so that's a huge opportunity for Busch Gardens and for the tourist industry in Florida.
But of course, the economic position of Cubans is very different from the economic positions of Americans, where I don't think they could afford a ticket to get into Busch Gardens.
Yeah, we're early, clearly. There's opportunity in the future. And there's employment as well. You know, we employ almost 5,000 people at Busch Gardens, team members at Busch Gardens at Ventura Island. And so there's job opportunities and career opportunities for Cubans in the future as well.
Could Cuba be a theme park destination? Let me know what you think. Follow WFLA Gene on Facebook and Twitter, and check out my pictures from Cuba using the hashtag GeneInCuba. Business ownership in Cuba? Welcome back, I'm Gene Ramirez. Small business ownership may seem like a capitalist concept, but it's happening right now in communist Cuba. Reforms established by Raul Castro after he took over for Brother Fidel back in 2006 have made way for cuentapropistas, or self-employed individuals, though they operate under the watchful eye of the Cuban government. It's a busy day in this barber kiosk in the small town of Sandino, Cuba. One in the chair, 2 waiting outside. The price is on the wall, the reason on the mirror. To provide a better life for his daughter, the barber, who also works for a government-run business, pays a monthly license fee and taxes for government permission to be a cuentapropista, in other words, self-employed. It's a newer concept that has given the Cuban people who can afford the pricey license a taste of entrepreneurship. With no formal training, he gets haircut ideas from barbershop flyers like this one from Miami. We're told if a cuentapropista can't pay his or her license on any given month, they lose it and can't reapply. The barber depends on his client's repeat business to make sure that doesn't happen. A cigar grower we met outside of Havana depends on his big single client, the Cuban government. Despite his cut being just a tiny fraction of the government's, he still makes more than if he worked for the Cuban government. This small business owner really caught us by surprise. She lives in Havana, she speaks Spanish, but she's an American citizen. She's truly a pioneer in Cuban small business partnerships.
We moved here in the beginning of 2012 because of my husband's work as a journalist. After the loosening of restrictions, we can export Cuban crafts. The pottery that I have here is made by an artisan in Trinidad. So I have someone who's my partner here, and she holds the license. It doesn't totally make sense, but for example, in order to sell tablecloths, there needs to be a license for that, bordadora.
Which is separate
from just general artesanía. Having an oil refinery is not one of those categories, or having a big manufacturing plant is not. For those types of businesses, you have to partner with the Cuban government. Yeah, they have to approve the investment, and they usually demand a share of the business. Our customers are Cuban and foreigners alike. This is not obviously a tourist zone, yeah, but we've had tourists that have come in knowing about the store because it's been known through Instagram and through social media. I think that what we're doing is something that's very positive. We're trying to help all these artisans be known. Everyone that works with us is benefiting from us having the store because they can sell their products. They have other avenues and places to sell their products. Cubans are incredibly resourceful, and they make amazing, amazing crafts.
Next up, an emotional encounter. More than 5 decades since my family left Cuba, I visit the home my mom left behind, meeting relatives for the very first time. Share your views on Cuba and pictures with me. Follow WFLA Gene on Facebook and Twitter. One of the Cuban people's biggest concerns is the two-currency system established back in 1994. Cuban workers get paid in one currency, the national peso, but have to buy goods in a different currency, the convertible peso. This prices Cubans out of buying many basics. What they can buy with their earned national peso is rationed, like a pound of chicken per person every 15 days, and milk only if you have small children. Many Cubans resort to black market goods, transported to major cities from the outskirts, stolen by fellow Cubans from government farms and businesses. If caught, the penalties are steep. Police are always on the lookout for those competing with the government, stopping cars and buses on main roads
for no apparent reason,
including our own.
A line didn't break any. We just got pulled over by police for no apparent reason. The driver, a line didn't break any rules. So you got out of the car, we all stayed inside. What did he tell you?
Just routine, just to check my driver license point and things like that. Routine.
And that's common?
That's common. I thought that he was gonna ask me to check my trunk too, but no, he didn't. So I just told him that we are friends and we're coming here, and that's it.
And that happens sometimes. They'll check your car. What are they looking for?
All kind of things. Black market, you know.
Because there's a black market economy here where people sell things that only the government is supposed to sell.
Yes.
But people who need the money steal these things from the government and try to sell it.
Yes. Plus, if they see luggage in my trunk, then they will start to ask me where you come from, what are you doing here, the motive of your visit to Paradero, like usually it's tourism. And they can sometimes they can give me a hard time asking me where we met us.
Right.
Things like that.
So they just want to know.
Yes.
But there's no reason for them to stop you.
No,
right? Just because they just want to know.
Yes. Maybe they saw a nice color in my car, and that's why.
We do have a nice car.
Well, that two-currency system is expected to end soon. However, Cubans worry about currency devaluation. For now, the Cuban government is hoping that foreign investment will help strengthen their economy. But as visitors from Tampa found out, that's not easy. Cuba's classic cars and future imports could one day be serviced with products from Tampa's Amalie Oil.
We have over 450 formulas, so we can formulate oil that's for cars that are over 30 or 40 years old, or for today's most challenging engines.
But the Tampa delegation, meeting with the president of the state-run Cuban Chamber of Commerce for the first time, knows it won't happen tomorrow.
We're not going to get there overnight. When there's assurance that property rights will be respected, there'll be freedom of speech, and there'll be the other basic rights that we as Americans enjoy every day in our country. When those things are satisfied here, I believe the economic pieces will fall into place.
At the meeting Wednesday, Tampa asking for guidance. Cuba expressing a need for foreign money despite Venezuela and China's investments.
Hopefully, in the not too distant future, we'll be able to start catching up. But we're behind right now in terms of developing relationships.
But that means playing by their rules, investing only in areas specified in this manual, including agriculture and oil.
There's regulations in any country that you go to.
And possibly partnering with the Cuban government.
Is the U.S. ready to subcontract the Cuban government to provide employees for these U.S.-owned businesses?
I think there's an opportunity to move, again, in incremental direction.
Many long to visit Cuba for the music, the cars, the intrigue of the forbidden fruit. For me, like for many others of Cuban descent, it's all about family. The names and the exact location in the story you are about to see have been left out for fear of government persecution. Now, let's meet my family in Cuba. I can just imagine my mom playing here on this street with my aunts and uncles as a little girl. It's been more than 50 years since my mom has stepped foot in her hometown 2 hours away from Havana. What she remembers as a quaint middle-class neighborhood, now faded. This is it. Hello? I couldn't travel to Cuba without visiting the home she left behind. There it is. I met my second cousin Mari for the first time. Oh my, says my mom's cousin Raquel, Mari's mother, realizing who just walked through her front door. We've only known each other through pictures. She tells me I'm the first to visit since 1964. I've tried to visit the U.S. 6 times, but was denied, she explains. We hold hands over the original floor where my mom ran around, under my grandmother's favorite chandelier in the once large, elegant, middle-class home. She tells me she grew up here with my mom and her siblings, staying behind when everyone else fled the revolution. She says my great aunts, now all deceased, always wanted to meet me. Adding they all wanted to see our family. Now, she's the only one left.
This wall, this is original on this side.
I toured the home as they explained it's been divided into 2 residential units and a small photo studio, pointing out original decorative objects, my mom's favorite, and religious images. My oldest sister's rocking chair, too. Then,
I look a lot like my dad.
Talk of a man I never met and something I never knew. My parents married in this very same living room. In a time when champagne flowed in this small town. Walking down a path I never imagined, they led me to my father's house, explaining it once occupied the white and yellow buildings, now also divided. Like so many Cuban families, many never having the chance to reconnect. And that's our story, the story of Cuban exiles and their children, once again divided, this time about restoring U.S.-Cuba relations. Thanks for joining me on this trip to Cuba.